Thank you for that. There's a musicality to a lot of the pieces in the anthology, and so to accompany the anthology, Keith created this soundtrack, and it's interesting that Antonio, your piece is titled Strange Fruit, because Strange Fruit is this beautiful piece by Billie Holiday that's just absolutely amazing. And a lot of people have covered the song. And I chose a particular line in Strange Fruit to include in my piece as well. And Jonathan, you kind of mentioned in your piece the songs Vicky, Mary, and Shante. It's interesting how music can particularly change a situation. Music is extremely important to me, so I was submitted. So I wanted to know kind of like what was your process like with writing for the anthology?
For me, it was pretty simple. The first half of this essay, I've said in some form or another about what kind of a wayward spirit. I grew up Pentecostal, and then I was Rastafarian for a bit, and I was Muslim, and then I was Buddhist, and I was Zoroastrian. I went through a lot of different incarnations. I was looking for answers, and the answer, it's like the kingdom of heaven is within, and you are the answer to what you seek. It was always here, and I didn't really realize that. So the first half of the essay, I would always tell people, particularly rabid people like Fred Phelps, or, in my opinion, T.D. Jakes, being confronted by a lot of different ministers and saying you're going to go to hell and damnation and all this crap. So I would sort of pull that out, and also when I would meet kids, I counseled homeless prostitutes in New York City before I moved to LA, and it was one of the stories that I would tell them, not because I wanted them to convert to any sort of theological belief system, but I think to me, we're all created out of love, whatever you believe. And if you deny your self-love, you're denying the God that's in you, whatever you call God. With that said, the second half of it, I included the music part. It all actually happened, but I wanted to be strategic because I felt like everyone doesn't have the same experience. Everyone doesn't feel like I can, call the name of a higher power and feel this way, and I fell on my knees and I'm going to church. Everyone doesn't feel that. So I was like, okay, how do I not alienate people who are like, fuck that, fuck the church, fuck the pastor, fuck whoever, and still kind of reach them. And so that's why I wanted to focus in the second half of the essay more on music and God being the melody of my whistle and all that stuff, so that when people are reading it, wherever they are, they can sort of get the message and not be something that is dogmatic. And so that was my process.
For me, actually, Jonathan, whom I've known for years, contacted me and said, hey, you should submit something for this book. So that's how I heard about it. And it's funny actually listening to his piece. We didn't know each other in Ann Arbor, Michigan, but we were there at the same time, and I went to grad school in Michigan, and hearing the story, I know all the places he's talking about, and we obviously talked about stuff before, and here we are. I am in my former life, and I guess sort of forever, an academic, and so I have in the past written about language, and in particular black dialect, and I've always compared it to jazz. I have a real love of jazz, that, as it says in my story, and the improvisational nature of what is known as black dialect is very much like jazz for me. So for me to write, I'm a huge fan of James Baldwin. As I've read Baldwin over the years, it's always had a musicality to it. So even as I write a fiction piece, I'm hearing the music and feeling the music, and I'm going to talk about the music in the piece. It just seems natural. There's that music is happening throughout my life. I think for everybody, though, you think about what's going on with family times, good times or bad. There's usually some music in the background. Every Sunday, for me as a kid, was some music going on. A lot of times blues, which I now appreciate but did not like at all when I was a kid. And I'm just jabbering now, but one thing about, and I did not like gospel music as a kid because I always wanted to dance, and they wouldn't let me dance to the gospel music. Now people dance to gospel music, if you've noticed, and I think it's better. So music is a big part of, I think, life, and given sort of autobiographical nature of a lot of these pieces, I think it makes sense that music brought it all together.
Yes. So can you talk about kind of what kind of interested you in that particular piece that you read?
Victor sent me a few pieces to look at via email, and I read all of them. But this particular piece stood out for me the most because as an artist, I'm always drawn to the things that are going to scare me the most. As an artist, there's freedom as having nothing to hide, and I'm drawn to things that are going to be very provocative, that's going to push the envelope. And so that piece just stood out the most in terms of really giving me something to sink my teeth into and just exploring. And even as I told people that I was doing this particular piece, they were like, "You're doing what? You're talking about molestation and your character desires to be molested?" And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do. That's what I want to talk about and bring to the table. But for me to connect to the actual piece itself, I've never had any desire to be molested when I was a kid or growing up, but I understand what it's like to want something really badly. And having my own experiences growing up as a closeted individual, always fantasizing about what it would be like to be with a man. And so I could connect to Alfonso's piece in that way, of understanding what it's like growing up as a kid and as a teenager wanting to be with men, but you couldn't because you were in the closet. And so fantasizing about classmates or teachers or for a very, very long time. And then ironically enough, when the actual deed happens or when you do meet someone, it's like, that was it? It's like not even a big deal. It's like actually quite disappointing, So you set yourself up for this long, lifelong thing, and then when it happens, it's a little disappointing. So, yeah. So that's what I brought to the table in terms of connecting to the piece. Yeah.
So for the contributors, for your particular pieces, after writing it, did you have a different feeling about the experience after, when you actually, saw it finish?
The experience of my life or the experience of writing?
Well, with your particular situation, what happened with the character in your piece?
No, I had thought about that situation off and on for years. Some of it only made sense to me in retrospect. Like there was this dynamic of the neighborhood bully who particularly did pick on me, and I did not at all get that he was just a boy with a crush on a boy. And really, we did see each other as adults, and he really did hit on me. And so it was but all of that really didn't come together in my mind until much later, but prior to writing this, but much later in life did I really understand what was going on. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily get that completion to the story, if that is the case, which I think many times it is the case, but you don't always get that kind of completion to the story. Honestly, it was, I'm happy to have done it and have had the opportunity for it to get out there, and I hope that it's helpful and useful to some people. It was scary to me, to be frank, even though I'm out, and if you Google me, you'll see me with my ex, and I have adopted a child as a gay man, but something about putting that story out is kind of intimate, talking about being bullied and having my name attached to it and just coming out again. That was actually more of the feeling that I had once it was there, and I would hit the send button. I was like, all right, you know. And then, you know, my mother's obviously going to be excited that something's there, but I don't know, this is the story she wants to read, you know, or my dad. But it's there, and that's it, yeah.
I think I felt happy having written it. I think that I was excited about somebody who was in a similar circumstance reading it potentially. When Keith brought this up, I've been spitballing with friends over email, like, what the fuck are we gonna do? It's like, it seems like every other day somebody's killing themselves, and they're like 15 or 16, they're hanging themselves in Detroit, shooting themselves in Florida, and like, it was very sort of, it was deranging to me personally, because it's like, you know, living in a culture where it's kind of like people are like, I'm gonna keep calling you a cup, and then you act like a cup, they're like, why are you being a cup? You know, so like, I feel like no one was really speaking to it, and you know, being real, there is a sort of racial hierarchy in the black community, LGBT community. It's one of the black community, I'm not talking about that, but in the LGBT community, when Matt Shepard passed away, I was doing a play about this gentleman named Anthony who was shot in the face outside of a club in Philadelphia. He was transgendered, and his murderer purportedly was a white gay male. And no one wanted to hear about the play, no one wanted to talk about the murder. People were just kind of like, who gives a fuck? Meanwhile, Matt Shepard becomes a patron saint of hate crimes. And I understand that you know, you have to have certain bodies, like Rosa Parks, you know, being chosen over a teenage mother who did give up her seat however many months before. At the same time, I feel like because cultural traditions, some communities don't believe in therapy. They don't like talking about things. And so for me, this is a great opportunity to sort of bring that into the light. Similarly to Antonio, I felt like after it was submitted, there was a little bit of trepidation, but again, it was only because it's such a intense thing, and that's why I was trying to be a little more funny tonight, because the first time I read it, I was like choking up and like, oh my gosh, I was really getting all this craziness. But then you think about it, you're like, well, I'm here, and I'm really glad that I am, and so why not be happy reading it? So I think getting it published actually has been kind of cathartic for me, because it's allowed me to go back and look at myself when I was 20, and you know, sort of do some healing, I guess.
The website for the book is the number 4, coloredboys.com. And again, it's edited by Keith Boykin. It's published by Magnus Books, and it came out, I believe, in like August. And it features 42 different authors, and the term for Colored Boys is kind of a take off of the original play for Colored Girls. And I always forget the full title. Yeah. Which eventually became a movie affiliated with Tyler Perry, directed by Lee Daniels. And so of the contributors, there are African Americans, Latino, and Asian males. So it's a diverse project. Within those people, there are people who are cross-dressers, drag queens, writers, directors, entertainers, personalities. There's someone who was on RuPaul's Drag Race. Her stage name is Jessica Wilde. Real name, I think it's Jose David. People who've been on reality TV shows. So it's just kind of like a diverse group of people. And that's what kind of most excited me to be a part of this project, because within the writers, we come from so many different backgrounds that it's kind of like a mini fraternity of people who are trying to make a difference through words. I'm a writer. I see the world through words, and I hope to make the world a better place through my writing. So yeah.
This was inspired by young men who had committed suicide and were gay or perceived to be gay.
Yeah, there was a period when there were about 4 or 5 suicides that were back to back. And what was kind of most just like heart-wrenching was that 2 of the individuals, they were 10 or 11, and both their mothers found their bodies. Both of them hanged themselves. And one of them, he was perceived to be gay. His mother didn't know if he was gay. They weren't able to have that conversation. But there was a period where there was a series of suicides, and this was kind of a response to anyone in that situation where they feel as if they're being harassed or bullied because of their sexuality or their perceived sexuality, that Keith envisioned them, someone giving them a copy of this book and saying, hey, I think that this will help you. So that's how it came about. And a lot of the other contributors, they're doing their own readings. So I wanted to do kind of like a West Coast reading of it.
Also, I have friends who work at the Trevor Project. Like, I invited people from GSAs and things Glide tonight. I think they're probably all at like holiday parties or something. But I think it's also each one teach one. That's the great thing about it being a book, is that you can give it to somebody that you see on the bus, or leave it outside somewhere. In my fantasy is like just leave it from a high school that somebody pick it up and like run with it. So I think that's the really empowering thing about it being in a textual form, and also with the website too.
And the website is interactive. You can look at information about the contributors. You can listen to some of the songs that go with parts of the story. So it's a really great website.
And Keith's significance isn't he like a longtime activist, and he was part of the Clinton administration and kind of starting the dialogue between the White House and the gay population.
Keith actually organized the first LGBT-specific conference with the community and the White House.
Who was his exact? He was like chief of staff, or was he?
I don't know the exact.
Yeah, it was something with Clinton. Yeah.
But now he's a commentator on MSNBC, CNN, so he's everywhere.